All right. Hello, everybody. And welcome to the latest in our Just Add AI, webinar series. So we're really excited about today's session. For those of you who've been following along, you'll know that this series has really been focused on what are the possibilities of AI, what are also some of the potential pitfalls of AI, and really digging into the fact that, as much as we've called it just add AI, it's not quite as simple as that. So we're very excited about this session because we've got some really, really interesting stuff to share with you today. My name is Kat. I'm going to be your host for today. I'm a digital strategy consultant here at Squiz. And my co-host Toby, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Hi, everyone. I'm Toby, and I'm Digital Consulting Director. Been with Squiz for about 10 years, and I'm kind of leading the charge on all things conversational search in EMEA. So, yeah, really excited to talk through a few bits and pieces related to conversational search today.
Awesome. Thanks, Toby. We also have another couple of people joining us today. Very excited to welcome some special guests. We have Sam Gilbert, who is a senior product manager, and Jason Matthew, who's an engineering manager. And these guys are experts in all things conversational search. So we're very excited to have them joining us today. And they're going to be adding a lot of background information to the conversational search journey and the functionality that we're going to be sharing with you guys today. So before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping. There is going to be a recording of this session available afterwards. We will make sure that you have the link for that. So if you'd like to rewatch or share that around, you're more than welcome to do so. We are going to be answering questions. So please, if you do have any questions throughout the session, pop them in the Q&A box. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen. We'll be monitoring that during the session and we will get to those questions at the end. And any questions that we don't get through, we'll make sure that we answer them and send out those answers after the session. And then finally, if you have any issues or any problems, please just pop those in the chat and we'll make sure that we help you out. So before we dive into the actual session today, a little bit of background for those of you who maybe aren't working with Squiz already. So Squiz is an AI-powered digital experience platform provider, and we have offices in the United States, in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. And with Squiz, our goal is really to make it easy for marketers and developers to build and manage and optimize intelligent enterprise websites. We also do work on portals and app experiences, really anything where you're trying to optimize the experience and create really great experiences for your customers. So we offer a lot of really great AI features built into the DXP, and they support customers with things like content management, search, personalization, optimization, forms, visual page building, you name it, we've got features that support that. And that's all developed and delivered via a composable architecture, which is really fantastic because what it means is that we meet you where you are. We work with the technology you already have, and we make it really easy to integrate that seamlessly into our digital experience platform. We've been around since 1998, and since then we've been growing in the number of public and private organizations that we work with across government, higher education, and professional services. So that's a little bit about us. I'm going to hand over now to Toby, who's going to provide a little bit more context for the session today.
Nice one. Thank you very much, Kat. Yeah, I guess the first thing to say, as you can see on the screen here, is that the answer economy is very much here, in our opinion. So what exactly is the answer economy? The answer economy describes the digital landscape where economic value increasingly depends on those who can deliver relevant, reliable, timely, and contextual answers rather than just content or products. So I think it's fair to say that most of us have probably spent the last 25 years, 30 years or so being conditioned by Google. We learned how to Google things and got really good at kind of figuring out what combination of keywords we needed to get the result that we wanted. In my role as well, I get to spend a lot of time talking to students in particular in interviews and focus groups. And it's really amazing to see that Google sort of isn't really a verb amongst students and generally a sort of younger demographic. They'll much sooner, chat GPT something or use Copilot or Perplexity. This idea of kind of Googling stuff and getting search results that they have to wade through feels kind of old-fashioned, which is madness to say almost, and feels kind of like hard work. And there are some stats on screen here which I think really kind of back that up. And I would say, of course, this does transcend demographics. It's not just students and younger people. It is absolutely going across, multiple demographics and something we're seeing, fundamentally change user behaviors. So just to kind of pull out some of these stats, 35% on the left-hand side there of all queries have transitioned into conversational formats in 2025. That's a really significant amount. You can see in terms of the value of the market, $62 billion is the projected value of the global conversational AI market by 2032, up from sort of around about 12 billion is what it is at the moment. The third stat there might not sound that impressive, but actually I think it's more impressive than it sounds. So in 2025, Google's global search engine market share dipped below 90% for the first time in about 10 years. Admittedly, not much below, but given what a huge influence Google is in the search market in general, anytime you see anything like that happen, it's worth kind of raising an eyebrow. And that comes despite the fact that Google were one of the first to market with Gemini. It used to be called Bard, it's now called Gemini. I'm sure everybody's seen it, the little kind of AI overview that you get at the top of your kind of search these days. Despite them having that, we are seeing LLMs like ChatGPT and Copilot and Perplexity, as I mentioned earlier. There's a ton more out there really grabbing some of that market share. There's a stat here, 800%. So that's the kind of growth that we've seen in weekly active users just across ChatGPT. And that's kind of not one of those sort of silly stats that, where it started from a very small base. We're talking like 100 million weekly users up to 800 million. It's really like significant growth. And that was, as you can see, between November and June 2025. So one would suspect that that has increased pretty significantly beyond that as well. If you just flip on to the next slide, Kat, yeah, I believe I'm going to hand back to you for this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, look, I mean, it's really clear that the market is shifting, things are changing, customer expectations are changing alongside that. And so I think it's important to consider, what does this mean for you and your site in particular? And I think there's two key elements that we need to consider here. So first is that we know that users are getting answers about you from off-site sources. So they're not necessarily coming to your site anymore. They're going to ChatGPT, they're going to Perplexity, they're going to Gemini, and they're getting information about your organization from outside of your website. And then the second thing is that when they do come to your website, they have significantly different expectations for what the experience is actually going to be like, because they're learning from these generative AI experiences to expect really contextualized, personalized, and direct answers. And so these two factors are really important because they significantly impact the decisions that you need to make about how you use your website in the future, what your web strategy is going to be in order to succeed in this new answer economy. So let's dive into those in a little bit more detail. So the first, which is that, people are finding information about you off your site. In some cases, they're bypassing your site entirely. And that might seem at face value to mean that your website is less important, but it's actually completely the opposite. Because when customers and users are bypassing your site and going to these generative engines instead, what the success of that experience is going to rely on is your content. So your content becomes key to success because your content is what's training the AI algorithms. And so if you have content that is messy or inaccurate or out of date, that's going to result in those generative engines making mistakes or surfacing information that isn't correct. So your content is what's going to allow you to control your narrative in those offsite experiences, because every page in your website becomes an AI training document that those engines are going to be using. And that is especially true now with the fact that, ChatGPT, Perplexity, and others are able to actually access websites and search websites. Because in the early stages of ChatGPT, it was just trained on the information that it was trained on, and that's all it had to go on. Now, when you put a question into these engines, they're actually going out and doing searches and collating search results and coming back. And so it's absolutely critical that your content is up to date so that you can control that narrative. So, you can see here we've called out if you've got bad content that can lead to inaccurate answers or outdated answers. Importantly, it can lead to you not showing up compared to competitors because remember, these generative engines are a competitive space. If I'm asking questions about where I should be studying a particular subject, it's going to surface information from one university over another. And so ensuring that your content is optimized for these experiences is going to mean that you're more likely to surface at the top of that list. The other things to consider there is that if your content isn't good, you're potentially missing opportunities to highlight key differentiators that you want people to be aware of when they're searching and asking questions about your organization. And then lastly, if your content isn't optimized, there's actually a lower chance of users actually visiting your site because users do go from these generative engines through to the main websites. They do continue that journey on. And so it's really important that your content is optimized in a way that's driving your key call to actions and getting people through to your website. So great content is going to flip the script on all of those things. It's going to make sure that you're in control, that you're in control of your narrative, and that you're competing against others in your industry. So the second element is when customers actually do arrive on your website, because they are eventually going to come to your site. These generative experiences are really well suited to early stage discovery. When people are asking early stage questions, when they're getting a feel for a subject, when they're doing a little bit of research. But eventually, at some point, they're going to have to come to your site to complete whatever the task is, to sign up, to register, to check out, whatever it is that they need to do on your site. And when they do land on your site, they're going to have very different expectations to what we're used to. So they expect things to be personalized, they expect them to be contextualized, and they expect the technology to do a lot of the heavy lifting for them and getting them from their question to the answer that they actually need. And so it's really important that we move away from this kind of poor experience, which I've shown you on the side there, which is, high cognitive load on the user. They're having to click backwards and forwards from your homepage to your menu to your search, work through the search results, go back, sift through all of this information to kind of compile an answer. And instead, we want to create a really direct line from what the customer wants to what they need in order to convert. So it's incredibly important that we lean into these new expectations that customers have and provide these kinds of conversational experiences. So based on all of that, I think it's clear that to succeed in this answer economy, your technology really needs to support you in a few key ways. Firstly, it needs to help you optimize your content so that it performs really well both on site for any kind of conversational experiences that you create and just for your user experience in general, but then also off-site in these generative engines. We need to have a way to be able to optimize content to perform well in both of those scenarios. The second thing it needs to do is really help you provide that effortless conversational experience on site. So it needs to empower you to be able to meet customer expectations in terms of the ease of use and that conversational element that they now expect. The third thing it needs to do is really make sure that you are in control and that you feel that you are have the peace of mind that the answers that it's giving out are actually accurate. And this is absolutely critical. And it's one of the things, even in the previous webinar series that we did on accessibility, this came up a lot. Questions around how do I know that the content and that the answers that this generative engine are going to be giving out is going to be accurate. And so this is really critical. And then the last one is meeting you where you are. And what I mean by that is you need a tool that is going to be able to evolve with your organization because implementing AI, implementing conversational search is a journey. It's a complex thing. There's a lot of moving parts to it, and different organizations are at different stages of that journey. So the technology really needs to give you the opportunity to iteratively implement your AI, to try it out, to learn, to grow, and to evolve as you go on your AI journey. So, We're going to pause there to do a little bit of audience participation, which we always love. So we're going to pop up a little poll for you guys. And what we'd like to know is how easy is it for people to find accurate information on your website today? So you should see the poll pop up in a little separate window. And if you can, have a read through those options, pick the one that resonates most with you, and then we'll go through the answers. And I'm really interested to see what the outcome of this one is. This is the first webinar. We're doing a couple more, so it'll be interesting to compare them across the different sessions. All right, I think you have probably a few more seconds just to answer that, and then we should see the answers coming up soon. All right, drum roll. Great. Okay, so in terms of the highest one here, we've got accurate content, but can be hard for users to find. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, if you've got accurate content, you're actually in pretty good shape.
I was going to say that's kind of what we want, right? That's the perfect
Yeah,
combination. We'll talk about it in a bit more detail, but ultimately, conversational search is only as good as the content that you have. It isn't magically going to, make up really great content. It needs to be sourcing it from really great content. So it's in many ways a good problem to have. If you've got the content there and it's good and it's accurate, it's well written, then yeah, conversational search is a really great way of surfacing that in a more kind of innovative way that, as we've talked about, is absolutely the way that users want to be engaging with
yeah,
finding.
yeah, absolutely. Great. Okay, well, thank you for that. So I'm going to hand over to Toby to introduce conversational search.
Yeah, nice one. I think if we flip on just one more, actually going to show you an implementation that's on the Squiz website. You can go and access it and play around with it. What you can see here, we built conversational search on our own website. It's designed to answer questions about conversational search. It's very, very meta. But you can see here, asking the question, how does Squiz conversational search work? You will get an answer to that question as opposed to links. So you can see the answer that comes through there. Just below it, you can see the sources of information where that answer was generated. You can also give it a thumbs up, give it a thumbs down, a nice way to kind of understand sentiment that you can kind of track in the back end. Crucially, though, as well, you can see there the ability to be able to ask a follow-up question. So in this particular example, the follow-up question was, how does it ensure answers are accurate? And that's really interesting because if somebody were to just come to the website and to type in, how does it ensure answers are accurate, most searches wouldn't handle that very well because they don't know what it is. In the context of a conversation in a thread here, it knows that we're talking about conversational search because the first question referenced conversational search. So it kind of keeps that conversation thread going. It includes that context, which is really useful. And yeah, all the kind of research and all the ways that people are trending to search in the kind of modern era show that that's how people want to get information. I'm sure everybody watching this has probably played with things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Copilot, and that ability to, do follow-ups based on an initial query. You end up going down rabbit holes in a good way to explore things in more detail or to find out new information that you maybe didn't know you wanted. That's a really, really powerful thing. So if we just flip on to the next one, it just kind of to reiterate what I mentioned there. So step number one, AI reads your content, and that's why it's so important, as we were talking about earlier, that your content is good. Sam, special guest Sam, will talk a bit more about the sort of safeguards we have in place to ensure that there aren't hallucinations and things like that. We focus in on your own content, and so as I say, it needs to be really good to power really good answers. The LLM then generates those personalized answers based on your content. As I said earlier as well, we can gather feedback around sentiment, sort of thumbs up, thumbs down. We can also kind of look a bit more deeply into conversation threads in terms of, what type of questions people have asked and how they've asked it and that kind of thing. Lots of data to be sort of gleaned from this type of experience. And as I mentioned, one of the most crucial things I think is that ability to answer a follow-up question, to continue the thread, and for it to be able to include all of that kind of context from the thread without having to, spell it out every single time and ask questions in a very specific way, which can be, I think, a frustrating experience. In terms of kind of implementations, there aren't only two ways of doing this. There are many ways of doing this. We have typically kind of gone with two separate options, although we have kind of like a custom option where we can do slightly different things. The one that we just showed on the Squiz website, that's kind of what we call our sort of all-in-one conversational search solution. It, as the name suggests, kind of keeps things in one sort of window, one thread. It doesn't actually include search results as part of it. It's a simple, I ask a question, I get an answer plus some sources, I can continue that conversation. Great. The other option, which many of our customers are kind of implementing and flirting with, is this idea of like a hybrid implementation. If you imagine a little bit like how Google Gemini works, where essentially you still get the kind of traditional search results, but above that sits a little kind of AI window, which gives you an answer to the question that you've asked in addition to those search results. So two kind of different implementations there. It kind of depends on what you're trying to achieve with conversational search in terms of which one you might go with. It might depend on the specific topic that you're focused on. And as I say, these aren't the only two options. There are sort of more custom options should you have other ideas in how you might want to implement this. So yeah, the kind of limit really is your imagination, but broadly speaking, these are the two, I would say, most popular implementations that we're working with at the moment. Okay, in terms of how that works and the back end and the safeguards that are in place to ensure that things don't go awry, we've built this really from the ground up with a lot of learnings from other experiences and other people that are doing it, or maybe not doing it as well as we thought it could be done. I'm going to hand over to Sam Gilbert very, very soon, and she's going to run you through exactly how that looks in the back end. So yeah, Sam, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Toby. Okay, so now that we've seen what the conversational search experience is like for customers, let's take a brief look at how it works under the hood and then talk about how you can control its behavior. So how does it work? Well, our conversational search uses retrieval augmented generation. That's an AI search technique that enables you to control the content used by a large language model when it answers questions. So what happens is when a customer submits their question, we use the question along with the context of the conversation to conduct a search of your organization's content for relevant fragments of information within your content. We then pass the question and the suitable information fragments to the large language model. And this information, along with instructions on answer format and allowed disallowed behaviors, is then used by the LLM to generate an answer. But before returning the answer to the customer, what we do is we use a second LLM called the Guardian agent to check the answer. And what that Guardian agent does is it checks each statement in the answer against your content and conducts a faithfulness assessment. And if we can't verify that the answer is faithful to your content, then we return a pre-agreed fallback response instead. So that process ensures that the answer takes into account the context of the conversation when being formulated and is based only on your official content. All right, so that ability to control the process is one of the most important things you need when implementing AI, and a solution that enables you to put guardrails in place is vital. If you don't have that with your solution, then you risk hallucination. So let's have a look at the controls that you have when setting up Squiz Conversational Search. This screen shows some of the backend configuration for conversational search, and there are 4 different guardrails that you can set up. I'll go into each of these in some more detail in the next few slides, but in summary, they're the ability to restrict the content used by conversational search, define what it is and isn't allowed to do, set the persona you want it to present to your customers, and control the fallback behavior when it can't or shouldn't answer a question. So let's take a look at each of these in more detail. All right, first up, we have ring fencing your knowledge base. This is where you establish what content will be searched when looking for relevant information to send to conversational search. So when you set up your search data, you get to set the content locations you want to include, as well as those that you want to exclude from your conversational search. And you're also able to define the file types you want utilized by the search phase. By defining that content and what is searched, you control where conversational search sources the information it uses to answer your questions. So that's the first of our controls. Next up, we have defining your use case. The use case allows you to define the job conversational search is there to do. It's also where you set guidelines around what it isn't allowed to talk about. It has two distinct parts, the summary and the disallowed topics. So let's start by talking about the summary. Just like briefing a new starter assists them in understanding their role in your organization, providing your conversational search with guidance on what it is there to do helps it better understand how to utilize your content when generating answers to questions. So you are an accommodation assistant. Your job is to help students of Squiz University to learn more about available accommodation options while studying at the university is an example of what you might put in a use case summary. Also, just like with a new starter briefing, you can define the topics conversational search is not allowed to talk about. And this is done in the disallowed topics section. And it's a second guardrail for preventing conversational search talking about aspects of your content that you don't want used when answering questions. The first one was the one we talked about earlier about ring fencing content. This is the second one to help prevent you using content that you don't want it to. Our next guardrail is the answer guidelines. This is where you're able to control the persona of your conversational search. So it allows you to customize things like style, tone of voice, and the level of detail you want your answers to have. So for example, telling it to use personal pronouns and not to use formal phrases. It's also where you'd instruct it not to indulge in behavior that's not in keeping with your organization's image. So for example, don't write poems or songs, even if the question asks for it, and don't use slang. And finally, there's going to be questions that your conversational search can't answer. This could be because the question is out of scope or you don't have the content required to answer it. For those situations, you'll want to have a fallback response, and the default response is where you can specify what you want this response to be. So in summary, conversational search is a modern AI search experience powered by large language models, underpinned with Squiz Search, and able to be controlled by ring fencing your knowledge base, defining your use case, customizing for your brand, and setting a fallback response. But how do you get started? Well, I'm going to hand back to Kat, who's going to tell you all about that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sam. So yeah, look, I told you guys at the beginning of this that it was exciting, and we are really excited to be able to talk about this functionality. It's a real game changer, I think, for all of the organizations that are working with us. And so I'm sure you're sitting there going, this is amazing, guys. How do we get started? And so, you know, when we developed this functionality, we knew that in order to implement it really successfully, we wanted to wrap some really great consulting and process around it to make sure that we were, you know, working with our customers to get them started on their AI journey, providing them with some support and building some reusable capability within the organization as well, where you can then just take this functionality and run with it and then start iterating. So let me talk you through what that process looks like. So our approach to rolling out conversational search is based on something called the thin slice approach. So what we mean by that is that rather than just adding AI, rather than just switching it on and going for gold, we work with you to understand what is a really great high value, low risk use case for conversational search that represents a very thin slice of your overall content. So rather than trying to attack all of your content at once, we work with you to figure out where can we start? What's a good use case where you've got reasonably high confidence in your content quality? There's a clear value proposition for the business, there's a clear value proposition for the customer, and it's relatively low risk. And so as part of our consulting process, we work with you to identify some potential thin slices and to prioritize which one you want to start with. From there, we ask you to supply us with some top questions or queries that you expect people to ask about this topic. So, for example, the example that Sam used earlier was around student accommodation. What are the top questions that students are likely to have about accommodation at your university, for example? So you would provide us those questions along with what you would consider to be an accurate response. And I want to highlight there, that's not because we're going to tell the AI to give that response. It's so that we can use that accurate response to test and to make sure that we're happy with the responses that are coming back. Because your conversational search is going to give you a different answer every time, which is fundamentally the same. So the facts are the same, but it'll be phrased differently. And like a human, if you ask me the same question twice, I'll give you the same answer, but it'll sound a little bit different. So those top questions and responses are what we use to actually test the AI implementation. From there, we run your content through our semantic auditor, which is a really incredible tool that allows us to put those questions in, ask them, see the response, and compare it to what we consider to be a good and accurate response. And that gives us an initial validation of your content and helps us identify any areas of your content that require uplift in order to improve the quality of the answers coming through. So we then move into our audit stage where we assess your content against how, it's run, the test results in Semantic Auditor, and we recommend some remediation for any issues. And again, that's going to be, there may be some areas that need more remediation than others. There may be some minor remediation, some more significant. And we work with you to prioritize that and work through the content slice. And then from there, once your content is all optimized and ready to go and we're happy with it, we launch. So that is what it looks like to work through your first thin slice. And I think I really just want to reiterate here, the goal of this process is to create something that is sustainable and repeatable. So once you've implemented your first thin slice, you can very easily run through this process again and release another thin slice and another thin slice. And so that's really what we were talking about earlier when we talked about meeting you where you are. This is an approach where you can bite off as much or as little as you want and work through it at a rate that meets your organization's needs, as well as your risk appetite. So I think, from the demo today, it's pretty clear that Squiz Conversational Search is a tool that's going to help you succeed in this new answer economy. And if you remember the slide that we had earlier, we talked about what is it going to take from your technology to support you in this new answer economy. And I think, based on everything that we've just heard, it's pretty clear that we actually do all four of these things. So from a content optimization perspective, the Squiz DXP has incredible auditing tools within it. And at the same time, the feedback that you're getting on the conversations, from the thumbs up, from the thumbs down, from your ability to see the whole conversation history and all the questions that are being asked, as well as that consulting process that we run through, are all tools that are going to help you continuously and iteratively work through your content and optimize it for both on-site and off-site performance. From a conversational search experience, you saw the demo that Toby took you through. We have a really great user interface and really great functionality that is going to allow you to lean into those new customer expectations and implement a very seamless conversational search experience on your website. Whether you go for that all-in-one experience or you go for the sort of hybrid or you do something completely custom, you know that this is going to be an experience that is going to be right in line with customer expectations in terms of what they're learning from ChatGPT and Perplexity and Gemini. As Sam took you through, our conversational search solution is incredibly secure and incredibly controlled. There are so many guardrails in place that mean that you are in control of the slice that you're indexing, of how the AI responds, of what it can or can't talk about. And that guardian agent is incredibly important in terms of ensuring that you have peace of mind that the answers that we're putting out there are accurate. And then lastly, as I was just talking about, it meets you where you are. So you can work through this at a pace that works for your organization. You can tackle the most important, most interesting slices first. You can really iterate through your content in a way that works with your strategy. So that is conversational search. We're very excited to share it with you all and would love to open things up to some questions.
Nice one. Thank you, Kat. I can see there are a few questions that have come in while we've been talking, which is fantastic. Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of pick a few out at random, and we'll see who fancies taking it. Um, the first one, which is a really great question, is how do you know if your content is ready for AI, or what needs to be fixed first? I'm happy to take that question. That's a really great question, and I guess that the short answer is that we work very closely with you to ensure that your content is in good shape. Kat mentioned the kind of consulting work that we do, which I think is a bit of a differentiator to our service as well. We don't just kind of give you the tool and say, hey, go and crack on. We ensure that your content absolutely is up to scratch. The actual process we go through in doing that, Kat kind of touched on it. We've got a really great kind of content auditing tool internally that we use, which looks at all of the URLs that you are indexing and essentially kind of spits out a mega spreadsheet that's color coded and includes all of the different kind of content fragments that would be supporting the questions that would be asked around that particular topic. And we can very kind of quickly at a glance see how good they are. So if we see a sea of green, that's great. That's what we want. If we see a sea of red, that's the opposite of what we want. Typically, we tend to see somewhere in the middle, and we'll then, off the back of that, be able to provide you recommendations on where you need to improve things. As Kat also mentioned, we then do a bunch of kind of semantic auditing. We run questions through a series of testing to actually look at the answers that we're getting. And that really quickly allows us to identify where we need to improve, perhaps where some content doesn't exist. One thing that I particularly love about conversational search in general is it actually kind of one symptom of it is it acts as a really great content auditor. You can identify, perhaps, you'll ask it a question, you won't be able to get a particularly good answer from the LLM. That's a pretty good indication that the content doesn't exist on your site or isn't very accessible on your site. So even if you're not doing conversational search, it's still a great exercise to be doing to look at where you could be improving content on the site. So yeah, that's basically how we make sure that your content is in great shape to do conversational search. Next question is, are all of the guardrails in the back end easy to set up by non-technical users? It looks like they are natural language prompts, so we'd be able to control that without having to have technical knowledge. Is that right? Who would like to take that one?
That one for Sam.
Yep, I can take that. So yes, they are natural language prompts. So you don't need excessive technical knowledge. What you saw on the screen there is really what you have to fill out. They are pre-filled, if I remember correctly, Jason. There's a template prompt there for you to then extend on.
Yeah,
so
correct.
yes, they are very easy to set up.
Excellent. Question here. Assuming you use Funnelback to power this, does it require you to have your Funnelback collections in great order, or can it work with fairly vanilla setups?
What do we mean by great order? What, Richie, if you're there, what exactly did you mean by great order?
I don't know if you'll actually be able to speak.
Type something in the question. That's a bit
Yeah,
bad.
I need to type it in the
So
chat.
yeah, so basically a vanilla funnelback, you don't need to do a lot of configuration on the funnelback setup in order to use it for conversational search. Oh yeah, no, you don't need any of that sort of stuff. So basically all you really need is a search package and some data sources. For conversational search, you may choose to create a package specifically for that because you want to limit the content for your conversational search to a subset of what you're using in your full search, or you might not, depending on what you're deciding to do with your slices. So no, you don't need to use any of the other capability in order to get going with conversational search.
Nice one. Thanks, Sam. Can we configure the conversational search to follow our tone of voice and guidelines? Yes, is the short answer to that question, and we would strongly encourage that you do that. We, through our kind of experience of working with multiple customers, we have a pretty good base of kind of instructions that we typically give as kind of default. But yeah, we would 100% encourage you to supplement those with your own tone of voice guidelines, because yeah, we want this to be unique to you, personalized to your audience. You will speak to your users in a unique way, and that should absolutely be reflected in your conversational search experience. Question down here from Mohammed. Can your search also develop drafts and checklists apart from answers, just like other AI platforms?
I'm not quite sure how that fits into a conversational generating an answer. So certainly, if part of the answer to a question requires a checklist, then we would be looking to include that in the answer. But it's not a general AI tool in the conversational search
Yeah.
space. There are other tools that we are looking at adding into our DXP that would do things with helping you to draft content for websites and things like that. But the conversational search itself is about generating answers to people's questions from your content slice.
Great, thank you, Sam. We've got one more question. So this one is, what kind of content can we include in the knowledge base, and are there any limitations on what we can include in there?
I'm going to let Jason take that one.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I think generally as Funnelback powers this, so for the most part, data sources that work with Funnelback will work with conversational search. The primary focus here, though, has been like web collections, so focusing on the website content, although text-based content is supported as well.
Perfect.
So that could be like text text files, kind of PDFs within the correct format, like not images, things like that.
Great, thanks, Jason. That's it in terms of all of the questions. Thank you very much for the questions. Yeah, great to have such an engaged bunch. Yeah, Kat, I'll hand over to you to wrap us up.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We will, like I said, send through a recording. We'll also send through some sort of notes on the questions that were answered. Please, if you would like to join us for our next session in the series, we're going to keep doing them. They're really fun. So keep an eye out on our LinkedIn and on our website for more details on those. If you'd like to follow us, there are some great QR codes there. And if you have any questions or you're really excited to get started and you want to find out how, you can email us at ask@squiz.net. So thank you so much for joining us.